Hey guys, in today's video, I want to go over brake master cylinders, show you the different types. I've got a single circuit and a dual circuit master cylinder. Go through the benefits of swapping out to a dual circuit master cylinder and kind of give you an overview of how a brake master works in general.
Okay, so a brake master cylinder in general is it's a cylinder with a piston inside of it, whether it's one or two pistons. And what happens is there is a master cylinder push rod that goes into this end. And as you push the piston in, you're compressing fluid and you're converting basically your foot pressure to hydraulic force. Fluid is inside of the cylinder. As you push the piston in, the fluid is pushed out to all the outlet ports, which have a brake line, a steel brake line going to a rubber one, that go out to your wheels, out to each wheel. And then you've either got a caliper or you've got a wheel cylinder out there. And what happens with those is the fluid goes into them and they expand and apply your brakes. So let's start out with the differences between a single circuit master cylinder here and a dual circuit master cylinder. If we look at the two of them, it's somewhat obvious, but in the single circuit, we have a single hole here in the top that feeds fluid from your brake fluid reservoir, which is what this is. This is where you would add fluid to the vehicle. Just pour it in there. It's just a single container with a port hanging off the bottom. You would have this is typically in the trunk of a Beetle. You would have a rubber hose connect here that would flow down to basically this that would be inside of here. So that's your single circuit, meaning a single area for fluid to flow into, and all of your ports, your outlet ports, are out here on one end, and there is a single piston inside of here. So if we look at this, we've got a brake light switch here. We've got line positions for front and rear on here. And then if we go to the dual circuit master cylinder, we can see right away that there are two holes for inlet ports. This is a 67 bus reservoir, and if you look at a dual circuit reservoir, it's got two buckets. So you've got, these are connected up on the top right through this section here, and you've got a bucket here, or a bottle, let's say here, and a bottle here with separate ports. If one of these bottles was to empty out, the other one would still retain its fluid. All right, and then to understand why that's important at all, we've got a brake master cylinder, fluid going into the top of each one. We've got a piston here and a piston here. This section here, if we flip this towards the side, we've got two ports for brake light switches. Then we've got a single port for your rear brakes, and you've got two ports here for your front brakes. It's very similar to this, except everything is happening out here, where this is splitting front and rear. So there's a lot of information out there on dual circuit brake master cylinders and why you would want one. The main reason that you would want a dual circuit master cylinder, or sometimes called a tandem master cylinder, is purely a safety thing. With the single circuit, fluid goes into the top, it's compressed by a single piston, goes out to your brakes. If for some reason one of your wheel cylinders, calipers, starts to leak, you have a brake line that ruptures, you have a hose that starts leaking, what ends up happening is all that pressure that's built up in here it's going to go to the easiest place it can. And when you have a leak, that's where the pressure is going to go, and it's going to squirt out, drip out, pour out, however bad it is, of that leak. And what happens is that removes all possibility of pressure to any of these other ports. Your brake light switch would stop working. Your more importantly, your brakes would stop working. You might be able to pump the pedal and get a little bit of stopping, but for the most part, if you get a leak anywhere in the system with a single circuit master cylinder, you're just going to have no brakes. You're pretty much going to lose everything. You'll have a little drag. You'll still have the parking brake for emergencies. That's why it was originally called an emergency brake, not a parking brake. And that's kind of the way this works when you have an issue. So now we move to the dual circuit. And because there's two pistons in here, what ends up happening is if you have a leak in one, let's say in this example, because this is a Volkswagen, this is going to our rear brakes. With some vehicles, non-Volkswagen, they actually, instead of doing front and rear, they'll actually do a split system where you'll have one rear wheel and one front wheel on one circuit, and then the other front wheel, the other rear wheel on a separate circuit. But for all intents and purposes of this video, that's not really something we need to consider. Brake fluid's going to go in. You end up with a leak in the rear. This is the rear chamber, the rear pistons inside of here. If this begins to leak, what would happen is all the pressure from this cylinder will be gone. It will leak out. You could eventually lower this bottle down to nothing, but as we mentioned, this side of the bottle will still retain fluid. This piston will still function even though this one loses pressure, and what's going to happen is your front brakes are still going to function 100%, and you're going to be able to safely stop the vehicle. And then at that point, obviously, you'll feel the difference. The pedal will, it'll take more effort, but what'll happen is you'll be able to safely stop, and you'll be able to, get the car serviced, fix it, whatever you're going to do, replace the failure wherever it is. And vice versa. If you have one front wheel cylinder that lets go, or maybe you just got a brake light switch that lets go and fluid's coming out of that, wherever the leak is, you're going to lose that circuit. But if the front leaks, then the rear is still going to pick up. If the rear leaks, the front's going to pick up. So either way, you're going to lose 50% of your braking, but 50% of your braking in a smaller car that doesn't go very fast is still going to be more than enough to stop the car safely and, get you pulled over, get you so that you can get somewhere and get and have the car serviced or fix it yourself. And that's the main difference between a single circuit and a dual circuit, and the safety aspects of a dual circuit. It's the reason why a lot of people will switch or convert to a dual circuit master cylinder. It's a very simple process. If you look at the ends of these, they're pretty much identical. The bolt pattern is the same. It will bolt directly into a earlier chassis. These were used until 1967. From 67 on, Beetles, buses, I believe everything got a dual circuit master cylinder by 1967. But switching it over for the most part is relatively easy. In a Beetle, this length difference doesn't affect you at all. If you have a early bus, the only thing that this really will affect is your pedal pan. 67 buses have a bump in the pedal pan for this extra portion of this. I think that's probably it. I'm not positive on Type 3s. Okay, to get an even deeper understanding of how a brake master cylinder works, we can kind of take this apart and take a look at it. And we'll do both of them, if this one wants to come apart. In the end of these, very similar, they have, this is the hole for the push rod. This is the top of your piston right here. I can't push it in with my thumb, but, and it's pretty simple. So there's a snap ring right in this end. If we pull this snap ring out, let's see if I can get it out of here. We've got a snap ring, we've got a washer, and then we start getting into pistons. So here is our first piston. And you can see the other one's still in there. Let me just whack this out of there. This one got stuck a little bit. No big deal though. And then with that out, should be a spring. There we go. Okay, so with that out, we can see, if I can get the light in the right angle here for you, you can see in here, that's it. It's just an empty cylinder at that point. Okay, and then your single circuit, this one's a little rough. So let's see if we can get it apart. It is a brand new cylinder, but it is, it does have a lot of rust. This particular one has a clip. Some of these will have a snap ring, some will have a clip like this one. It's the same idea. Clip comes out. I have my doubts I'm going to be able to get this cylinder out of here on camera, but let me, all right, let me get that one out of there and I'll show you the insides. Okay, I ended up having a wedge a bolt into the end of it. So we've got our first section comes out. Now we should be able to walk the rest of this out here. Okay, with everything taken apart, we can kind of see that they're very similar. We've got a piston here, we've got a piston here, and everything in this area is basically the same. With the dual circuit, we just have a second piston. If we look at the single circuit master cylinder first, this is the side that mounts to the Napoleon hat, or the firewall, I guess. And you've got the hole coming in here. Into the top, we have two holes inside of here. There's one on this side and a smaller one on this side here. So if we take a look at the front of the master cylinder, the parts that go into it, we have a check valve, a spring, a cup, there's a washer in there, and then your piston. So as you step on the brake pedal, the rod is forced into here, and what it does is it pushes in and compresses this spring, pushing this piston down into this chamber. And what happens is, you got to look at the way these cup seals work, is it's got a lip around this whole edge, and it's not just there to hold the spring. It actually is flared out a little bit more than the diameter, and the purpose of it is, as you build up pressure in this cylinder, this seal expands and actually closes up, or let's say opens up, and puts pressure on the inside wall of this cylinder. And then when you release the brake, pedal, this is able to close back up a little bit. The piston has all these holes in it, and it allows, as it travels backwards, it allows fluid from this front hole to be drawn back into this area, and it allows it to get past the seal into the pressure chamber. If we look at the dual circuit master cylinder, we have a front piston that sits inside of the bore of the cylinder. You have a cup seal here, you have a cup seal in the back side right along here, and you have a spring. It's a pretty tight spring on these. And then on the rear, we've got a second piston with a cup seal here, a cup seal there, and then a reverse cup seal on this side, and another spring. And just like the single circuit with these holes, we have the same thing here. You have a feeding hole back here, and you have a compensating hole up here. This one's in the middle, this one's off to the side. It's just where they're drilled. And same situation, as you compress the pistons and this seal runs past this compensating hole, it stops fluid from being allowed to back up into the bottle, yet the rear hole is allowed to push fluid back up into the bottle. So you equalize the pressure on it. You're building pressure here, you're releasing pressure here. When this comes back, same type of thing happens. This cup seal retracts a little bit, and the fluid is allowed to pass back through, past the cup seal and into this whole area in here. Same thing with the rear piston. Same exact thing is happening. It's just got a cup seal opposite. This one's facing opposite so that this can make this, it can close off this pressure area by the seals expanding. And then the same situation here. This one doesn't need one in the reverse direction because it's the end of the cylinder bore. Now, when you look at these two pistons, we see how if one of them was to fail, the opposite one would still be pressed. There is a limit here where this, if this side has no pressure in it, this spring is going to collapse, effectively putting the back brakes on first. But if there's no pressure back here, it's just going to collapse and bottom out, and it'll still push the front piston. Your pedal's going to move a little further than, that much further than what you would think it should move, but you'll still have working brakes in the front or rear, depending on which one of these was to collapse on you. Now, a common thing that you see with Volkswagens is you'll get a leak right up here at the front that'll actually leak into the car. And basically what's happened is this inside cup here, instead of being able to hold fluid in here to lubricate for and to equalize pressure as the spring is returning this to its resting position, you'll get some brake fluid that'll pass through here, come through the front of this, and leak through the boot. And you'll see that your push rod is wet. Maybe it'll drip on the floor. If it's real bad, this will actually fill up, and when you step on the brakes, you'll get a little bit of a squirt around the edges or out here on the end. Either way, your brakes are not going to work as well as they should, and you can feel the difference. It introduces air into this portion of it, and then when you release the brake, it allows that air to, it's either going to travel into the bottle or some of it's going to travel into the pressure side of the piston. But either way, that's a pretty common thing that happens with them. Another thing you may experience with a bad master cylinder or a master cylinder that's beginning to go bad is having no fluid leaks at all. You're not losing fluid, but when you step on the brake, you don't have a firm pedal. Maybe it's soft, maybe it's a fading pedal. And when I say fading, I mean you step on that brake pedal, the car comes to a stop or begins to slow down, and the harder you push on that pedal, the more travel you're getting. It doesn't remain firm. It's firm to start, and then it begins to fall, and the pedal keeps continuing to drop in. And what's happening there is as you're pushing this piston in, this seal has either dried out, it's become deformed or damaged in some way, just from age. And what'll happen is the brake fluid, instead of building up pressure here, you're building up pressure, but some of that pressure is bypassing and going around the seal back up into this rear chamber and allowing it to get back into the bottle and everywhere else. And you just end up with, a dropping pedal that continues to get worse and worse until eventually that piston stops building pressure, and then you have brake failure. But it's something to keep an eye out for. Okay, so now with an understanding of how a brake master cylinder works and the difference between a single circuit and a dual circuit, let's do a conversion from a single circuit to a dual circuit and install one of these on a pre-67 Beetle pan, and I can show you the difference that there's really no, it doesn't take, you'll see it doesn't take up any more space. Installation is exactly the same. Very simple, and it adds a good amount of safety to the vehicle. All right, so as we're putting together this car, we've got the original master cylinder that came out of it, and we've got a replacement that I'm going to put in. I'm putting disc brakes on the front of this car, so often when you change out from drum to disc brakes, you'll replace your brake master cylinder with a dual circuit master cylinder that was made for disc brakes. This master cylinder is made for, the part number on it is made for a Ghia that had disc brakes in the front, drum in the rear. So it's already set up for that. I believe that they're actually the same even on a Beetle, or at least aftermarket makes them the same. And what I'm going to use is this reservoir. These typically come with this bushings in here, and it has this plastic nipple on it. And what that does is you'd have a hose going from here to a remote reservoir. So something along the lines of this, where a hose will travel from here to here. This reservoir is usually in a Beetle or a Thing or a Ghia. It's either in the trunk. I think Things are kind of inside the car, but the fill is in the trunk. But so either way, it's kind of in the trunk. But anyway, that typically is a remote reservoir. What this one does, they consider this like an off-road reservoir. It's kind of like a 67 bus reservoir, but they've made these bigger to fit into a Beetle master cylinder. So this is going to sit right down on here, be mounted directly on the master cylinder. To put any fluid in it, you're going through the wheel well to get to it. You can see it very easily right through the wheel well. So they work out well. There's really no place in a dune buggy for a remote reservoir. So this is typically, a lot of the time, this is the way people do it. What was in this car was a remote reservoir, and it was just kind of screwed to the body. So anyway, what I'm doing is I'm going to put these plugs back in. And like I said, these were just pressed down into there. And I'm going to put a little bit of grease on here to try to hopefully help this thing slide in easy. They can be kind of tough to get in there. So we'll see how it goes. I've already checked it, and it makes sense on this to have the fill close to the front of the master cylinder, or the pedal side of the master cylinder, because if you look, it leaves this flat and it leaves this line accessible. If we flip it this way, to me it was just a little too close, getting too close to where this line's going to be, and I feel like this side is probably fine. The Napoleon's hat on the frame is right here. The body will be right here, so it will be close up to the body where you're pouring it in, but it will be the back side of the wheel well. So, and I'm just going to gently push this thing in, and hopefully it goes in nice and easy. You got to kind of go easy because it is just plastic. I don't think I've ever broke a brand new one, but I've definitely broke older ones trying to get them off and put them back on and replace these rubber bushings in here. So I got that pretty much on. You just want to make sure there's no gap between here and here. And then you saw I gave it a wiggle this way just to try to seat, because the bottom of the reservoir has the same type of lip. And I just want to make sure it gets into that bushing. There's a groove in that bushing, or grommet maybe is a better word for it. But, and I just want to make sure that that kind of sits in there all the way and it's not going to pull out, and that'll just make sure it doesn't leak and everything's good. And that's it. Other than getting grease all over everything, this master cylinder is pretty good. We'll go get it in. I do have to, I painted this because it was, again, it was like a lot of stuff when you buy it comes with like a zinc coating. This, I don't remember now if this was gold colored or if it was just gray, but I didn't want it to get rusty. These two bottom holes on a dual circuit Volkswagen master cylinder are where your brake light switches go. Obviously in this car, I really only need one brake light switch, but the Volkswagen was designed to have two that this setup come out of. And the reason for two was so that they could monitor basically both sides. If one side stopped working, got a leak somewhere, whatever it was, they had a 3-prong brake light switch in these. And what it would do is you'd have basically one prong, 2 prongs, would put the brake lights on. It would connect the circuit. You step on the brakes, pressure goes in and it connects the circuit and puts the brake lights on. By having the 3rd prong, I'm not actually positive what's inside. I'll try to see if I can find a picture to show you, but what ends up happening is you get that little red B light on your dashboard that you can press in to test, and it'll light up when you're testing it. I'll grab a picture of that too, and I'll throw it up here. That little light will come on if you have a circuit that isn't functioning correctly. I'll see if I can find like a diagram and I'll put that up too. But anyway, I'm just using 2-wire switches because all I don't need that little light. I don't need any kind of warning. One of them's really just going to be to plug a hole, and the other one I'll have wires going to for the brake lights. Positive in and then out to the brake light. So when you step on the brake, it connects the circuit, electricity flows through it and goes out to your brake lights. I have 2 different ones. They obviously came out of 2 different boxes. Just stuff I had in my stash. I keep a stock of Volkswagen parts around. I couldn't find 2 that matched, otherwise I would have. Everything seems like they're just different brands over the years. But anyway, I'm going to get these in, and then I'll bring you over to the chassis, and we'll get this thing mounted. All right, so we're over here by the chassis. Got these brake light switches in. I should have mentioned, too, that they're probably, I'm not positive, they probably are a tapered thread. So that one seems like just different brand, but that's tight at that level. This one's tight at that level. Should be fine. Shouldn't leak. But obviously, I'll check everything before this chassis gets a body put back on it. So that's going to sit over here. If you look at the way this is set up, you can see, if I bring a light over, you can see you get these sleeves in each side, and if you remember earlier, this one kept falling out on me. I have it kind of just propped in there. The whole purpose of that is just so that when you get this bolt, and there's some paint in there I'm going to have to pull out, but when you get this bolt in, this bolt is going to go in, tighten up on the master cylinder, and you don't want to crush this. This is just basically sheet metal. It'll hold, the pressure of the master cylinder and the brake pedal and everything else. But you don't want to tighten a bolt down and clamp in on that. So you've got these bushings in here, let's call them sleeve bushing, that hold that. So you just want to make sure that those are present on your vehicle, because obviously they are able to fall out like it did on me. So, and this is just a simple, should be a simple bolt on. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to throw a little bit of anti-seize on here. Hopefully I don't have to pull this thing off anytime soon, but this will just, I like to use anti-seize on stuff like this. It helps stuff go together a little smoother, and then it definitely helps when things are coming back apart down the road. So, yeah. I got a pick. I'm going to scrape some of this paint out of here. It's just it's probably on both sides, but there we go. These are a 13 millimeter. All right, that's it. So from there, I just got to run new brake lines, and you can see that the dual circuit master cylinder fits fine in place of the single circuit. And if you use this type of reservoir, it's a really simple upgrade. Running a remote one's definitely possible. You just got to kind of figure out where you're putting it and, you know, how you can fill it easily.